to Yarra Valley Council for the support for this event and for supporting sustainable agricultural initiatives. This is Poppy. She may well upstage action. And my name's Maya. And this is Leafy.
Hi.
And we're here as, and thank you too for giving such a lovely acknowledgement of country. Here we are on Wurundjeri country, has been for tens of thousands of years. And their deep knowledge of place, their stewardship and the way they worked with land and cultivated a sustainable existence here are themes that will actually be really woven into our conversation today, because Leafy has done something that very few people in our generation have done, and it really touches on some of these. It's a really fascinating story in so many ways of bridge building between ways of knowing. And we'll see where we get to in our conversation, but I think some of those things will come out. I, pre-pandemic, started a project in collaboration with Permaculture Yarra Valley and Peace Farm, a project that we called Downshifting Revolution. And that was a series of conversations, interviews, and I was the interviewer, with various different permaculture personalities who had fascinating stories to tell about their own journeys into sustainability, their own learnings, and a conversation on how we as a community can learn together and do things differently, live differently, imagine differently, connect up. So we would have a community dinner and then a conversation. And so we're just bringing that back now, for the first time post-pandemic, with this little collaboration. Thanks to Chelsea from Council for that. Now, full disclosure, Leafy is my housemate. So we've had not many, but a few times to sit down together, and Leafy has given me some tantalising tales of his year. And I asked if he would come and tell his story at Downshifting Revolution. I didn't realise what I was asking. Leafy has never yet, this is the first time he has given a public conversation, a public interview about his year. It was a really big time, I'm discovering, really, really big time, full of some experiences that can actually also, you have expressed, also quite difficult to talk about. So we'll see where we get to. We'll all be learning together, but I just want to say an enormous thanks to you for agreeing to do this and to share your story of a story that came out of quite a complex, intricate and difficult time to decide to leave behind this world and go out into the bush and go, I'm staying here. And I'm staying here and I am just learning what I can from the land, and I am eating what I can from the land, and I am not coming out. That's a huge, huge thing. And thank goodness he came out. Because the lessons that we can all learn from Leafy's courage and resilience and deep listening to land over an entire year are really enormous lessons for us all. So thank you. Yay.
Thank you. Thanks, Maya, for having me here. I want to meet the guys you're talking about. He sounds awesome. Maybe we should hold off on group clapping for Doggo's sake.
It's all right. Stop it.
Cool.
Yay. So, yeah. So we'll just see where we get to. And so I'll start off the questions, but pretty soon I'll be handing it over to you. So any questions that you have, please, there will be, because you will want to know how he did what he did. So to be
Sorry, just quickly, if I get emotional, I don't need a hug or anything. I'm comfortable with being in my emotions. So, yeah, it's a pretty raw story for me. Just if anyone's uncomfortable with me displaying my emotions, I'm probably going to cry, probably pretty quickly. So if that's not okay for you, just, you know, you'll see it happening and you can walk off the dramas. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or join in. Exactly. Thank you.
join in, exactly, is a really good point. I mean, this is the thing that, you know, at first you might not realise, but like just to think about the kind of courage that it takes to go out and to go, I'm going to stay here living off what I can find. Off we go. Off we go. So,
I was wearing, everything I'm wearing now, I
Yeah.
was wearing for most of the time I was out.
yes, that's right. He's
What did you
period
name it, Ellie?
costume.
Period, yes.
Period costume.
Yeah. Period costume. So I was wearing this in the bush for a lot of the time I was out there, and that was designed to be able to sneak up on animals and stuff. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Why? Why did you want to go out there and do that?
Why did I want to go out there and do that? That's, yeah. I don't know. Next question. No. So. So, I got lost in the bush once and I had to get rescued by the police. And before being lost in the bush, I was interested in things like investment properties, and I was aiming for a property portfolio, and it was very capitalist driven. It's how I was raised. I was raised to be poor and capitalist driven, so not very much money, but always aspiring to money being the greatest, most, I guess the primary resource that needed to be the goal. And it kept landing me in misery. Basically, I was always depressed and anxious whenever I was in that pursuit of that. That's a whole nother story that I'm just going to touch on for there and then move on, because essentially coming away from that style of life, I didn't know where I wanted to go next, but I went for a bushwalk one day and I got lost. And I was only out there for like 12 hours, but they did have to get a helicopter to try and find me. It took the cops 12 hours to find me and I guess rescue me, but in that 12 hours I kind of had a lot of time to think about the lifestyle I'd been living, and it was a catalyst of a bunch of other things, but essentially I felt so disconnected from my human self, and that's what I had that realisation that we all used to live in the bush, and for me I thought I was just going to die, and I didn't even know how, because I had a fair idea that I'd had a few weeks worth of food stored in my body, so I didn't really know what was going to happen, but it was a hugely shocking and scary and life-changing time. And so after that, after I got rescued, I went and did some survival courses. I did a survival course through Aussie Survival Instructors. It was a 4-day course, and it was really life-changing. And at the time, I thought that I wanted to be some kind of survivalist, which maybe, depending on who you ask, that is kind of how some people view me. But I was interested in the connection with nature that it provided. It was something that I completely lost. And as a kid, I used to play in the bush, but I got disconnected from that, and it got sold to me as dirty to play in the mud and, like, you know, build tree houses and do all the fun stuff. So I detached from that and aimed for shiny new apartments and things like that. What was the question?
No, this is perfect.
Cool. All right. Well,
perfect.
What was the question though? I'd like to semi-keep it.
No.
That's
How?
context.
Yeah.
So, why did I go live for a year in the bush?
Yeah.
So COVID hit in 2020, more or less in Feb is when it, I can't remember when the first lockdown was, but that coincided with the breakdown of a relationship that I was currently in that was probably 2 years stale already, and it was like we were just doing a shitty attempt at trying to make it work. Sorry, I didn't see you there. And it also ended a lease, and also like lockdowns were happening, so I felt so disheartened with the world and terrified and scared, and me and my partner at the time had become very reclusive, and so we didn't have a large social network or anything, and then that relationship ended, and I just felt so despair and so burnt by people that I said, stuff it. Like, I never went out there to live for a year in the bush. I decided that I'd learnt enough and had enough skills that I was going to go and give that a try and see if that was the way to live life. Because I've been burnt by people a lot over time, and my faith in humanity had kind of dwindled a fair bit. You know, if I'm honest, it was really low, which is ironic when in about half an hour's time when you hear why I came out. Same reason, but yeah, it was a bit of a journey. But that's why I went. It was the breakdown of a relationship. I'd spent the last 4 years learning all these really cool skills. I wanted to put myself to the test, but essentially I was running away. I was running away from I couldn't find a society that I felt like I fit in. And so I was, returning to nature, I guess.
So that decision came to you. I'm going to go out, I'm going to turn my back on this world, this way of doing things. I've learned enough. I've learned about bush skills. I know how to light fire. I know how to find water. You felt, you knew how to do sort of bush medicine and these kind of things?
Yeah, I definitely got what I thought at the time was a lot of knowledge. I had a lot of book knowledge, and I'd been taught by a gentleman by the name of Jake Cassar for a few years pretty intensively about survival skills and edible and medicinal plants in New South Wales and things like that. There was no one point where I said I was going. It was like, after the lease ended, I just started hanging out in the bush. And then I have a sick mum. So I would come and see her sometimes, but that just got less and less, and I just kept going back. And so eventually, like, I didn't sign a lease anywhere, I didn't move in anywhere. I just started living in the bush. Yeah, I'm sure there was a defining moment, but none that really stick out, more of like a grind of life that I couldn't do anymore. And so whenever I went to the bush, especially after getting lost and then learning all those skills, it just felt like the only place I felt safe or comfy anymore, that I could really just be. I could just scream into the abyss and there's no one to, I don't think I'd ever scream cried before that. Obviously I've done a fair bit now, but yeah, it was the only place I felt safe and comfy and able to actually just be me, like the raw version of myself. Yeah. So it took me, kind of. It was more of a taking than me going, okay, from the 24th of whatever, I'm going to go and live in the bush from this date. It was more like, I don't want to keep coming out of the bush. Like, it was, kind of this blurry thing. When COVID hit, I dehydrated like hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of veggies, and so I had this gigantic sandwich bag full of dehydrated veg, and I knew that I could just live off that as long as it lasted in bush tucker. And so, at one point I didn't come back for like 4 or 5 months. Something like that. And 3 months at Jackie Parker. All sorts. So it was more like that. It wasn't a point where I was like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to live in the bush for the rest of my life.
But there were, as you said, like month after month of just eating what you found on the land. And you were there until and after, though, that bag of dehydrated veg ran out, hey?
Long time after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you take with you? What did you have with you when you set out? You had a car and you'd park it and you'd head out into the bush.
So like as we discussed, sometimes I'd take a knife and nothing else, and that was maybe a reflection of not caring. I don't know, I think that was a bit disregard of nature's power, but sometimes I would just sit out with a knife, sometimes I would take a bivvy or a sleeping bag. It just depends. Sometimes, like, I know where some cabins are in some very remote bush in New South Wales, and so I'd spend a few months in there. So I'd only walk in for the 2 days with a knife, but I also knew there was a cabin waiting that I could essentially live out of and things like that. Animals that frequented the cabin, and started to get really familiar with places. So a lot of the times just a knife, but like, again, I would take this jacket, and this jacket has lots of different uses. Whatever I could carry in my pockets sometimes, occasionally if I was going to a brand new area, I might take a compass. I think I only did that twice. Not much.
Very light.
It was very, and I definitely wouldn't encourage that. Very light, and that's probably not a good idea, for sure. I was really lucky, I think, and there was maybe, some bigger things than I understand, like maybe looking after me or something.
So what would a typical day look like in a place where you are? It's you and your knife.
Yeah. So it all varied a lot. It varied lots. In winter, it was all about firewood. Like, that was it, firewood and food. Like, that's all you could do. In summer, it was a bit more casual, a bit of frolicking with the wallabies, as I was saying the other day, or playing in rivers and stuff. Like, you wash in summer. In winter, you don't really need to. But life. I would basically forage all day and try and have one big meal at night, because I don't know if anyone's ever tried to live just off food that they can forage, but it's quite hard. If you're eating as you're foraging, you're not ever going to feel full. You just feel hungry all the time because you never get back. So the goal for a lot of the time, especially towards the end, was to forage all day, compile as much food as I could, and then eat it at night and go to sleep and then recover. So a lot of the days literally just spent foraging, chasing animals, tracking animals, like everything that involves foraging, as well as hunting, trapping, living is a full-time job when you're not trying to pay money to do it. It really is.
And what sort of things would you eat?
A lot of different bush tuckers, some I can talk about, some I can't. Lots of animals, some I could talk about, some I can't. I was treating it like I was going to live the rest of my life on land at the start. So I was eating anything I knew was edible, essentially. Lots of plant foods.
Can you give us some examples?
Lots of animals. Yeah, a lot of yams. Yams in some parts, in remote parts of bushland. Everyone know what a yam is? It's not that. Up in New South Wales, it's totally different. It's a rainforest species of vine that grows really long tuber potatoes. But yam just means potato in a lot of different languages. So, yeah, a rainforest yams, Dioscora transversa, for anyone that likes their Latin stuff. A lot of those, a lot of bush tomatoes. In this particular one place where I first started, there was enough of that to sustain my life for a long time. Marsupials, yeah, like a lot of freshwater, like, not crate, what are the little ones? Yabbies, things like that. Bugs and grubs and insects, a lot, ants, and yeah, a lot of lamandra. You think that's funny, but the leaf bases is a lamandra. A lot of that. It's a starchy carbohydrate, and it's good for getting your energy levels to spike, although it's not long-lived, but sometimes.
How much of so does everyone know what a lamandra looks like? So not everyone. Matt, where's your closest lamandra? Got one round here?
On that corner, it's about 50 metres down.
Can I ask you to go and grab one for us?
sample?
Would you be so good?
Doesn't have any,
Go and get a nice fleshy one.
yeah, doesn't have any fruit on it or anything like that.
No, we're looking at the base. We're looking at the base. Thank you. Just to give show and tell, because we forgot to bring props. So lamandra, what other?
There's a lot of different types of grasses and natives that are similar to lamandra, where they have that white starchy base. Matt's going to grab a leaf base out. That's not actually it.
It's a different lamandra.
No. So that's not. People don't talk about it because they want people to eat the base of the leaf. But there's a different way to process that, which you can get a lot more starchy carbohydrate from. But it does destroy the plant, and it's a native, and it's illegal to kill native plants. So, yeah, I think if he comes back with a leaf base, maybe someone can try it. That's not all there is to it. There's a fair bit more to it. To be able to sustain life off it and stuff, you know what I mean?
I was wondering.
Yeah. So you're not just nibbling on a leaf base, like you would with the xanthorrhea as well, or whatever they call it, the grass tree. They say you can eat that, it's got edible leaf bases. There's a lot more to it, but they don't want people going out there destroying plants just to be interested in, is this bush tucker? But yeah.
However,
I understand why you thought that.
However, you were living off it. There was no other food.
At times, yeah.
Yeah, at times.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Especially if I would go out, just to go on tangent, but I would go out for weeks on end. Like I would have a base camp and go out for weeks on end. It never clicked to me to think about getting food on the way back, and so often I would sort of go out and forage all the way along the way and kind of eat the food out of the trail that I'd walked, and then have to come back, and that would be where I'd be eating lamandra for days, just to try and get back to base or the 4-wheel drive, or you know what I mean, like wherever there was more food. It's like, if you get down to just eating lamandra, you don't really be doing anything except walking to your destination and eating lamandra, because there's not like energy, like you're avoiding dying, like it's just surviving.
Just surviving.
And not long term. Like I don't think you could do it for months. I'm sure there wouldn't be enough nutrients and stuff in there. To mix in some dandelions.
So would you be willing to share how you processed lamandra?
We can show you. So the white core there is edible. It's a carbohydrate and tastes like peas. But if you were to dig up the whole plant, that essentially comes from the heart of the plant. And so you can rip them out in clumps. Like they've been broken off. If you were to essentially dig up the plant, decimate the base of it and the heart of it, you would have a huge heart of starchy carbohydrate that you could then just like fry it up, and it actually gets a better taste to it, and you can just munch on it. And it's, one of those is going to give you enough energy for a day if you're just trying to walk somewhere and you've got water. If anyone asks, we just munch on the leaf bases. But that does come out of quite a lot more, and you can eat the roots of it as well, but don't.
You have answered a question of mine that I've had for a very long time. Because when I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been fascinated by bush food and who's tried to find out about, you know, what is the food, the carbohydrates. Yeah, Lamandra leaf bases are often spoken about, and I went, there's that much on every Lamandra leaf base, and it's like eating like 1/8 of 1 pea, and I'm going.
Yeah, so imagine you're trying to get walking 20 k's in a day, and you like, yeah.
And it's like, this is not adding up. This is not adding up. So when
there's a bulb at the base of each cluster that comes out of, and it's like, it's a pretty good nugget. Like you get, especially like the closer you get to the coast, the longer that nugget even gets, and so you'll get whole mouthfuls of that on Lamandras on the coast. You'll get like a whole mouthful of starch from just one cluster. Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up.
No worries. Same goes with xantharias, but they're heavily protected and they take a really long time to grow, so don't go chopping out a xantharia heart. Like, I'm doing 150 years worth of work if it's only this tall, so yeah, be kind.
So, do you want to speak a little bit to that question of your ecological learning in that, like, because you had a few years of learning about native plants and ecosystems. Is there any
environmental scientists here? Oh, all right, that's okay. Cool.
If you're willing to speak about it, because look, it's a salutary tale. It's you learnt a lot from it.
Yeah,
I learnt a lot when you told me.
I definitely
and
did.
No one here is going to do what you did.
Yeah,
So I think
so
you're
like
safe
a lot of
to
my
share
modern
it.
day ethics are taken from the time I spent with a year in the bush. So a lot of the things that I did then, I definitely wouldn't do now. I wouldn't encourage people to do, and I won't even teach people some of the stuff. But so when I set out, I'd learnt from a survival perspective. I'm now a permaculture teacher, and I'm very more focused on plants and feeding people with plants. But again, I didn't have that knowledge. I learnt from a survival perspective, so it was a bit more like slash it up and eat what's like, get some food out. Like, it was a real focus on acquiring large amounts of bush tucker. And so I kind of went in with that attitude. As well, I was herding and in a low place, so I wasn't the most ethically aligned that I could be. And so just talking about the place that I first spent 3 months and ate the yams and the wild bush tomatoes, I woke up one day and I'd eaten all the food within like maybe a kilometre radius. Everything, including the marsupials and the antechinus and the protected yabbies and all sorts of stuff, which I later found out I didn't know at the time, but or I guess that learning is what opened my eyes to the fact that the answer is not for everyone to go back to eating off the land. It's not. Like, it can be done, but we're just going to decimate the little bush we have left. And that was this huge life-changing moment. That's where I realised I had to farm at the same time. I had to at least put a return on the land, even if I never went back there. I've never been back to Jackie Barker campground, which is where I was when I ate all the yams and the tomatoes. And I hope it's recovered, and I might go back there one day, but I feel very, very sad about I pretty much decimated that environment to a certain extent. And I think it could probably come back. I wasn't going that far away, but it was a beautiful place. It was stunning, and I had changed the environment, and that still doesn't quite sit with me right.
But you said also something really interesting about that you think that there had been people there who had been cultivating it to be so productive.
Yeah, and I always wondered if there was maybe still some form of mob living on land there. It did look like it was being farmed, although I was there for months and I never saw anyone, but it looked like it had been grown and deliberately rehabilitated. But again, I didn't know that until the end, when I started walking around where the tomatoes used to be and realised, there was actually rows of them, and what's that about? You know what I mean? Obviously now I completely understand, but at the time, I didn't realise, and I would see yams that had been deliberately planted, not just grown from a thing, like they were getting, grafted, and not grafted, but like sprouted and being actively managed, which I didn't realise till after. So and it was such a remote place, you couldn't even get there without four-wheel drive, but it made me realise that there's people still living on land that are doing it regeneratively. There is ways to do it, but it's not going out to an area, staying there and eating all the bush tucker that you know how to eat, I started farming after that, and I started planting as I went, and I started deliberately, actively trying to put back in anything that I took out. Hakeas and wattle seeds are a big one that sustained me for a really long time in certain situations, and I always made sure to spread the seed and always take pockets full of seed whenever I was moving areas to throw them down along the way and stuff, because I still feel really crappy about that campground. Especially the mammals, like the animals there. I just thought that they would regenerate quick enough, and animals don't regenerate quick enough in the wild, not for us to eat them, like solely as a protein and fat source.
So, and it also, really taught you about how, Aboriginal people had sustained and managed land over long times by moving, by continually moving.
Correct, yeah.
And,
and fire and all sorts of different stuff. Like that, they were essentially literally custodians. They were literally permaculturists of this entire rock that we're on. It's like the biggest farm ever. And I really started to see that once I left that campground, as I left, like I realised it, and then I started to see it everywhere. Like you do get farmed yams in a lot of places in New South Wales in really remote areas. And I don't know who's doing it, but it's, yeah.
It could be from a long time ago, though.
Could be.
From a very, very long time ago.
Yeah, yep.
Because, from my understanding is, all the way along all the rivers and creeks were big yam fields the sheep came along, and within 2 years, every single one of those, tens of thousands of years old yam fields was completely annihilated. Those plants made locally extinct, pretty much. So that those ecosystems cultivated so lightly, and really lightly. It's not farming in the ways that we know it.
No.
Because, you were spreading seeds, but most of the time, for most of Australian landscapes, those seeds need to go through the guts of animals, or they need to be burnt.
Well, heat, yeah.
And
I was heat activating them.
You were heat activating.
Yes, but you have to heat activate them to get the food source out of them, particularly hakeas, which are really high in protein and fat. There's more protein and fat in 100 grams of hakea seeds than there is in a cow, for like meat, for example. But yeah, you have to heat activate them because they're closed shut. And so again, even just by not culturally burning, we're changing the landscape because these things aren't being activated as much anymore, only in the really hot summers. So yeah, yeah.
Bush medicines. Can you talk a bit about, you said to me when we were chatting that getting food and managing infection were the two main tasks you had to stay alive. Can you say a little bit about managing infection?
Well, yeah, that was the other thing I did all day. Manage infection. I mean, what do you want me to say? You get cuts in the bush and they get infected, for sure.
And what did you do about that?
Well, I used antibacterial and anti-infectious medicines and stuff. The medicines are a little bit tricky. They're held as sacred knowledge, and I'm not even on country of the medicines I was using, so I can go into a few things. There's some stuff I can't, but essentially bacteria and mental well-being are the two main ones that you need to manage with medicine, for sure. Yeah.
What do you mean mental well-being?
Well, for me, I was not in a good place when I went out there, and that kept reoccurring. I kept getting into depressions and always struggled with anxiety to some extent. So having a break, giving yourself a break from mental space with things, or slightly changing your state of mental alertness or well-being. There's lots of medicines out there that aren't like psychedelics, like what you'd call mushrooms or anything like that, but they're mood adjusters or something. I'm not really sure how to say it without, I wasn't out there doing drugs, but there was definitely things that had antidepressive qualities that I would use if I could tell that I was in a really unwell place. Yeah,
and did you know about those uses before you went out? Or?
Yeah. I did a lot of research on that sort of stuff because I've battled depression my whole life. So it was all and I never wanted to take pharmaceutical medication for it. So more or less, as soon as I learned about some of the medicines out there, I started engaging with them before I'd gone to the bush to live.
I mean, we all do that. We all have coffee or St John's wort or lime juice or, tea, yerba mate. Foods, so many of our foods are medicines or mood adjusters or helping us adapt to our circumstances.
Yeah, exactly.
So food and medicine are just in a continuum, really, aren't they? Of things that we need.
Yep.
And you also talked about plants that are antibacterials and so
really
forth.
Powerful stuff. I always rave about red gum sap. It's not the same as down here. Up there, it's Angophora costata, or it gets called the Sydney red gum or the smooth barked apple. And it has a very, very powerful blood. The sap that comes from the tree It was one of the few trees that up in New South Wales back in the day, members of mob would own certain trees, and they would be called the grandmother tree, and they were really, really nourished as a medicine tree because the sap was so powerful at stemming bleeding, at being antibacterial, antiviral. They used it for tooth infections. It would cure an upset stomach. It had a lot of different really powerful medicines, and to this day, other than right now, I always still carry some on me. It's in the car, but so I will still harvest that occasionally when I go up there. That can replace half your emergency kit, really. I've heard stories, and this is not my story, but I've heard stories of people like tearing half their arm open, falling off the back of a four-wheel drive, and putting so much red gum sap in there, it's an astringent as well, and so like within 48 hours it had binded the skin back together, and like within 2 weeks it had actually started to heal properly, like with no medical intervention. It was in the desert. So pretty grim stuff. And Corymbia gummifera is another one, the western bloodwood. It's a very similar thing. It's very, very powerful medicine that we don't use, and we could replace half of our first aid kits with the sap.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's one that I like to spruik, I think. Yeah.
You told me this amazing story about when you got stranded at the beach and what you ate. Can you tell that story about the pan and the ants? Can you
Yeah, sure.
Good. Just checking.
No one likes ants, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't say the dog one. So I had a four-wheel drive. That's where I was getting, like I would drive to places as far as I could on four-wheel drive tracks and then just walk into the wilderness, and I'd done that on the coastlines as well, and I was up somewhere around Urunga. I don't know if anyone knows there. It's kind of like the northern rivers in New South Wales, and it was on the coast, and there was this huge long stretch of beach, and there was a river, like I'd driven along the beach really far, and there was a river that connected the beach, and so I wanted to do some fishing because my life was based around getting food. And on the way back, I didn't get any fish, and on the way back I got bogged right as the tide was coming in, and the wave was splashing up against the car door. Far out. That was horrific. And anyway, I got out of the car and just walked up the beach and found, like, I couldn't do anything. Like, if I was going to dig the car out, I was going to be doing it underwater. Like, I don't know if anyone knows about four-wheel driving, but essentially you've got to wait till the tide's gone and then dig it out, like, the next day, and whatever damage is done, it's done. So I just walked into the sand dunes to a nice, bushy area with lots of trees and stuff. And
you hadn't eaten that day?
No, I was planning on eating a heap of fish. I was going to have the best seafood meal. Didn't happen. Started a fire. Yep. I guess you just want to hear about the technique, right? Like I found a rotting log, a log that had been eaten out by termites and all that stuff, and essentially I just made this technique up, but I'm guessing it's probably used somewhere. But I put one end in the fire, and then put the other end was just kind of sticking up out of the fire, and I just put a fry pan under it, and all of the termites and ants and stuff that were inside the rotting wood just started walking out quite quickly because the other end in the fire, and they were getting smoked out, and then they were just falling into the fry pan and dying. And that night I ate a gigantic fry pan of stuff, termites and ants, and by the end of it tasted like fried chicken, but maybe that was a psychological thing. But that was the best tasting bugs, grubs or insects meal I've ever had, because I was hungry. And every time you go through like a near-death experience, or even like just when you're by yourself too, it's exhausting to go through like a real adrenaline spike or a peak in your adrenaline. And so coming out of that, if you haven't eaten, like you're just ravenous, and like you just want to be nurtured and safe and put in a warm blanket with this big feed, you know. So those ants were awesome. But don't eat ants too much because they'll upset your tummy, especially if you don't cook them. They're very, very acidic. Probably not. I'm sure there's ants out there you're not supposed to eat as well. This is not a bush tucker talk by any means. That's on the...
You do that.
Yes.
You do bush
I was
tucker
about
talks.
to plug the date and then I forgot the date. That's on the something of May. Yes. What date? 15th of May. Awesome. If anyone wants to, actually go on a foraging bush tucker walk and talk, and then a breathwork and cold plunge afterwards. Thank you.
Fantastic. You talked about how... Sorry, I should just check the time.
No one's yawned yet, as far as I've seen.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I want to give people plenty of chance to ask questions, but I really wanted to... you spoke about feeling really depressed and despairing when you went in there. And you spoke to me about how that changed by being so long in the bush.
Mm.
Do you want to speak a little bit about that sense of the nourishment that came your way from that experience?
From the land, or why I came back?
I'll leave you to answer it in whatever way you feel to.
After a while, like I tried to come back a few times, I guess, or like I had to come out and see my mum who was ill, or you know, I came out a few times, and each time I actively made the choice to go back. I wasn't ready to come out, which is really interesting. And then after a while, my supports and friends became like trees and animals, and I was saying to May, I used to chase wallabies around for days on end. Like there's this big campground in the Blue Mountains called Noons, and it's a huge open space, massive, and the wallabies basically just live all around it, and they stay in a different place each night. And so for days on end, I would just follow them and see where they were staying that night. And the land and the animals and plants really became where I learnt to, I don't know, it seems funny, but where I learnt to trust things again, living things. And then as time went on, I started to, like, I don't know what the catalyst was, but I had a near-death experience once, and I had no one to tell. I wanted to tell someone, and that was towards the end, and it made me realise that I actually did need community, and I actually came out for the same reasons I went in, essentially, was because I needed that community. I didn't know where the community was, I didn't know what people I was looking for, but I knew that living in the bush was not the rest of my life. And so I always say that there's 4 things you need to survive. Like the survivalists will say you need food, water and shelter, but I think food, water and shelter and community are the 4 things, because you can't go through things in life without community. Not really hard stuff, not emotional stuff. We're not meant to. We're supposed to be surrounded and brought in when hard things happen, and we're supposed to be able to talk about it with friends and process the emotions. And if you don't do that, you really start to lose your stuff. Big time. Like as I was saying to you, I'd met people out there, and there is people out there that do what I was planning on doing for years and years on end, and I never met one that still had their shit together mentally. Sorry, I'm probably not supposed to swear, but it's a pretty accurate description. Like they'd all lost a part of themselves mentally, and they weren't the same. And yeah, I didn't want to be that either. You know, I didn't understand my place or where my people were, but I knew I wasn't even living in the bush for the rest of my life anymore at some point.
So even though that place had sort of helped you regain something, like a sense of sort of nurturance and connection with the more than human world, with the trees and the animals and the plants, and you felt a kind of a grounding and a safety there, almost enough to lead you back into being able to trust people again.
I guess so, yeah. I think somewhere along the way, nature made me realise that it wasn't people, it was the people that I'd been trying to make my community. It had nothing to do with people, and that's what I realised, was like, it's not all people, it's just the people I'd been, it's just the way of life I'd been trying to do it. Yeah.
And then since you've come back, you've found your peeps.
I know most people here, which is nice. Yeah, definitely. Got an awesome community in New South Wales, an amazing community in here, and all over the shop now. Yeah, I definitely have. And I know what my peeps look like now. I can just, I stay away from my non-peeps. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you for sharing this, just a tiny taste of a very deep,
teach me how to write a book.
Maybe. But I'd really love to open up to any of you for questions, and Leafy will answer them to the degree that he feels to. So if anyone has any questions, please, you can speak out your question, and I can repeat it so that it's recorded.
I have a question. What shelter? How did you create shelter? You weren't living out in the elements the whole time, were you?
No, I'm pretty good at finding overhangs. Spend a lot of time in overhangs and caves, but not like cave systems, caves, overhangs. I'm pretty good at shelter construction, as far as whipping up a quick debris shelter for a few days and then turning that into something more sustainable. Huts as well. I'd studied outdoor rec before I went, so I'd been on some excursions where I did know that there were some huts quite deep in remote areas. So yeah, bush huts, caves, all sorts. Yeah, all sorts. Overhang. Yeah, I slept under little rocks some nights. Like it just depends. In summer it's cruisy, open stars. Like it's really nice once you get used to the bugs and that. Winter was tough, but so I still stuck with caves and already constructed huts that I knew of. Things like that.
An extension of that question, you said you'd go out with just a knife. If the weather turned super cold, how did you keep warm?
Fire.
Fire.
Yeah, I just did it. Yeah, there were some very uncomfortable nights, but yeah, fire, always. I learnt really early on how to make fire, and I practiced a lot with different woods that you can use. So I made sure that I was pretty comfy with that.
So you never took matches?
My knife has a flint and steel thing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use that sometimes, but it's really hard to use. Like, honestly, it's easier with that particular one that I'm talking about. I didn't have it on me, unfortunately, but I'd rather spin fire. So actually, once you get comfy with it, it's actually not that hard, really. Yeah.
Question down the back?
Yeah, how did you do the hunting of mammals?
What was the question?
How did you hunt mammals?
Yeah, hunting.
I didn't hunt mammals, I trapped mammals. I used some trapping techniques, none of which are probably legal and I'm not going to go into, but I, especially early on, I did a lot of trapping and really primitive stuff, like throwing a rock at something can be effective if you get a really good shot at it. I'm not saying that that's a really effective way of hunting, but it's worked before for me. Yeah. Something worth mentioning, once you haven't been with food for 3 days, your brain completely changes. It doesn't matter what you're phobic of. In my experience, I'm quite scared of snakes, but if I haven't eaten for 3 days, I will run towards a snake, no worries. And that's not ego, that's not, like, your brain chemically changes. It does something different, and things don't become scary anymore, and things don't look gross. You know, your brain is just like, there's food in that animal, like, yeah. So, lots of ways, trapping, grabbing, all sorts, anything you could imagine. Real primitive, gross stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming you mainly cooked on the fire. Or if you want to elaborate on that. But
Yeah.
so you mentioned having a pan. Was that just being by the car, or did you?
Yeah, because I had the four-wheel drive stuck. Yeah, so the four-wheel drive was supposed to be my base, or I'd set it up to be a base vehicle, so it did, yeah, I could have lived out of that indefinitely as well. Yeah.
But you weren't by the car for huge tracts of time.
No, for weeks and months on end, definitely. But in that one particular scenario, yeah, I had the pan, which was nice. I mean, I probably could have just got a coolie. What is it? A coolamon. Does everyone know what a coolamon is? Just like a big bit of bark? Yeah, anything you could use. I just happened to have the pan, but anything to catch. Yeah, that's how I learnt that sugar's fermented. It's just leaving sweet shit in the coolamon for too long through summer. And then drinking it and being like, whoa. Yeah. Yeah. Good times.
One thing that I asked early on is, did you take salt with you?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes a lot of time was, like, not a lot of time, but some of the time was spent on the coast. Some of the time I carried salt.
But you didn't at the beginning, I think you learnt something with that.
Correct, yeah. Because if you don't have salt in your diet, you get really crampy and you actually stop being able to hydrate if you don't have salt, no matter how much water you drink. So you do need salt in your diet in order to drink water. And if you're inland, one of the few ways you can get it is from blood of animals. That's essentially one of the only ways. So yeah, there was a lot of times when I had to do that just to be able to rehydrate.
Raw blood?
Yeah.
Fresh blood?
Yeah. As fresh as can be. You know, yeah. 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 Salt's it's tricky and it's necessary.
You dug your four-wheel drive out of the bog?
Did you dig your...
worried about
Eventually, yeah. Yeah.
You dug your four-wheel drive out?
I did.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Danny?
I blew the turbo on it. 2,500 that I didn't have living off the land, yeah. Yep. But that was okay. I just dropped it off to the mechanic and went bush again. I was like, I can't deal with this for a month. Goodbye. Yeah.
Vanula?
Yeah, not really a question, I don't think, maybe. I actually read an article about someone who had gone into the mountains on a retreat, and they were alone, isolated, and find a lot of the locals that and this return to the community and finding that very overstimulating and overwhelming and really struggle to reintegrate. So I suppose maybe curious about how you managed.
It was really, really tough. Yeah, I would have anxiety attacks going into cities, not even big cities like Newcastle or the Central Coast or built-up areas. It took a long time. It's really overwhelming. We don't realise how much that stuff goes on in the background once you have a break from it. Even now, like I went to Melbourne the other day and I've spent the last few months in the Yarra and like, just there was a point on the highway where I came around and there was all these gigantic buildings in front of me. I don't habit cities that much, so that for me even was like, whoa. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's always a bit scary for me, but yeah, it was a lot more intense back then. I just had to do it really slowly. Yeah, I hung out on the fringes. Like there was a time when I'd not been living in the bush anymore, but I didn't live anywhere, so I was living in my car, and that's when I met my wife. And yeah, that was like a really slow integration. Like I was still living in my car / the bush when I got my first job back, and yeah, that was a customer-facing role, so it allowed me to integrate with people and remember how to do all the niceties. Yeah, slow. I recommend slow if you go out for a long time away from people.
Any other? Yeah.
Wondering if did you come across much feral animal activities like cats, wild dogs?
A lot. A heartbreaking amount, for sure. Yep, definitely. And for a while, I was on a mission to try and correct that somehow, but it's out of control. Boar, deer, like pigs, deer, cats, dogs. It's pretty rough. Like yeah, there needs a massive overcorrection for us to fix that. It's yeah.
So how dangerous are like if you come across a pack of dogs?
Have you prepped him?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, they're out there for sure. There's big mobs of dogs out there, definitely. Yeah, and I've had a few run-ins a few times, and there's some pretty rough stories around that. I'm not going to go on it today, but yeah, they're definitely out there, and they can be aggressive if they get hungry. And if you're by yourself, it's a real danger if you're somewhere wilderness for sure. They are, yeah. Packs of dogs like 15, 20 deep, no worries. Yeah, or wild ones, and they look somewhere between a German Shepherd and a hyena. Yeah, they get these weird patchings and colours that they all seem to get after a while, multi-generational. So there's a lot of cats out there as well. And cats get big when they get in the wild. They start to get bigger again. So
What do they taste like?
it's a story for another time. 15th of May, come and check it out. Leafy Adventures. Horrible.
Changing the subject
Yes.
a little bit. So while you're sort of in and out of the bush, did you have anybody, any person you could talk to and relate to and get counselling with, or you were totally on your own?
No, so like my mum was ill at the time, so I would go and see her, but that didn't really help. My friend around here somewhere, Ian, I used to come visit, and Max, that little man over there, hey Maxie, he'd just been born. So yeah, definitely I came and got mental well-being, staying at his place whenever I could, although it kind of, it wasn't that much. We had really different lives at that point. So, but yeah, definitely one of my big saviours over there. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. Cool.
Did you ever get sick out there?
Yeah.
How did you navigate that?
Different each time. There's medicines out there that'll fix your stomach problems. I got a cold once in winter that I got pretty scared with. Like I couldn't stop doing the shaking, and it wasn't even like cold shaking. It was like, I don't know, soul leaving the body type shaking stuff. Just time, and yeah, they're the times when I wanted someone to call, but didn't, I just gritted it out, which is not advisable. Yeah,
How
you
did
just
you deal
do it.
with food while you were sick like that?
How what?
How would you deal with food while you were sick like that?
Funny enough, Lamandra leaf bases are actually, they're kind of like a rice, where they're like super gentle on your stomach. If you just drink heaps of water, like you won't really throw it up, you know what I mean? So if you're throwing up from other stuff, you can just eat those really boring carbs, lots of ground orchids, what do you call them, tubies and stuff like that. Really plain foods, and you come good. Staying hydrated is the important thing. Salts, yeah. I don't know. I feel gross just thinking about it. But it's so lonely. It's like, it's worse than just being sick of any kind here. It's like, you're also in a cold cave, hoping the fire doesn't go out. You know, like, yeah, miserable.
What was it like then adjusting to like food again, like sort of the richer foods when you came out of the bush and things like that?
I literally just overcorrected hard. And I don't even know if I've recovered from that yet. I'm quite the burger aficionado. That was the one thing. Like, it's tough, and I don't eat that much bush food at the moment either. Although I'm still learning about it down here, but it was interesting. It was a massive overcorrection. I wonder, if I'm still sick of the man to leave. It was interesting. I find it really, I don't know, it's still ongoing. It's still something I observe because I don't go and eat that much bush food at the moment. And it's around. So I'm not sure. There's something psychological about it that maybe I just did it too much. I don't know, still reflecting on that. Thanks though. Hey mate, how you doing? You gonna wave at all these people? Say hello and that.
I'm just curious about your health, and I wonder if you had your health back at all, or were you aware of being in like peak health at any point, and what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, so definitely points where I was emaciated, hungry, like near death hungry. And there was times where I was, definitely at my physical best, maybe, as well. Certain yams have a steroid in them, and so if you combine that with a lot of walking activity and stuff, you actually get quite muscular, I guess. And because I was walking a lot, my fitness was, pretty up there, and there's a lot of hard work, trying to build shelters and stuff. So it was good most of the time, except when it wasn't, and then it was like, you feel like you're dying, almost. Yeah. Oh, more hands are going up.
Up the back there?
Yep.
I'm curious if you ever spoke out loud or were you always silent?
Nah, I'm now and forever will be someone that talks to trees and animals for sure, big time, and more, definitely. That may be where I stayed sane, and I do that all the time now. But great question. Yep, all the time. I would scream and everything. Like, it was a huge emotional processing for me. Yep. Yeah.
And you
No
also
one's asked that before. That's a great question, because this is something that I'd wonder. Were you silent the whole time? No, I'm sure I clenched my teeth a lot too while I was out there.
You made the point when we were chatting that everyone that you met spoke all the time to themselves though, and to other things.
Yeah. So as I said, I met people out there that were also living out there in the bush, and you would, when I say meet them, like you would cross paths and they would acknowledge your existence, but very often they were running dialogue with themselves the whole time. Which was like really scary at first, because I'm like, oh, this is anyway, all my prejudices came up, and then that was a motivator to not. I didn't want to go that far. I didn't want to be walking it. Like, I was comfy talking to the trees and the birds, but I didn't want to be having arguments with myself out loud, and that's what seemingly was a common theme, which is
And that,
scary.
your amazing reflection on the importance of debriefing after trauma. I mean, that's something that's understood now in therapeutic circles and trauma recovery specialists, the importance of, debriefing and coming into community after really difficult circumstance. And I can imagine these people didn't have that, so they had to perhaps process with them and their other multiple selves, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then that
definitely
perhaps sort of broke something in a way.
Yeah, I wonder. I could definitely see easily how it would happen, for sure, especially if, you chose not to come back for years on end. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
There were some other questions. Matt?
So, being out on the land and having your inner thoughts and your voice, and
Voices.
maybe on occasion, being at your wit's end.
Yeah.
Were there moments when, you asked for guidance and you were received with guidance from
I think
the
so.
spirit world?
I think so, for sure. I guess it's not really quantifiable, but like, For sure. I'm really keen to see signs as what they are. So yeah, there'd be times where I'm at my lowest, might be standing on a cliff edge thinking, you know, I'm done with all this stuff, you know what I mean? And then, I don't know, something like all of a sudden, you know, an echidna runs past with a cat chasing it, with a dog chasing it, all of it. I don't know, yeah. It's like, oh, maybe that's a sign. Maybe it's not, you know what I mean? And maybe that's just a coincidence. But I took all those kinds of things, or, you know, a tree falling nearby, or, you know, things to just be like, nah, okay, I just chose it to be a sign. So yeah, definitely. Not sure about the validity of it, but it got me through. I guess, yeah.
And the other part of my question was, because I wasn't very present in the last hour, was I don't know how far you travelled, but did you sort of go between riparian areas and prairies and...
Yeah, so I was at like the most western or eastern point was I did spend time on the coast. I was up to maybe 60 k's inland on the Great Dividing Range. Most of the time was spent on the Great Dividing Range between Barrington, if anyone knows any geographic of New South Wales, Barrington and Canangra, which is quite a large strip. It encompasses the Blue Mountains and Yango and Wallawai National Park, and yeah, it might be, I don't even know, I'd be guessing. Yeah. What was the question? I was just trying to quantify the size of the area that I did it in.
As far as being diverse in your diet,
Yeah.
you know, like I did overhear that you ate a whole field of yam daisies. You know, would you then move on to the sea and back to a riparian area?
Yeah, definitely, and especially with the seasons and stuff as well. Yeah, I was, you know, hungry and desperate in Barrington, but I had good shelter. You know, but on the coast I wouldn't worry about the shelter too much, but I had a lot of food and yeah, things like that. So it was always a balance, always paying attention to the seasons and yeah, trying to get ahead of the curve when you can. Yeah.
Did you do some climbing up the mountain?
Yeah, I did. The stupid thing was that my biggest hobby back then was rock climbing. But if anyone knows rock climbing, you can't do it alone unless you're doing something called soloing. And so I did a lot of that stuff, and that was where I had a lot of the near-death experiences that I needed to talk to people about that I couldn't.
Did you get up Mount Yango?
No, I wouldn't go up there. I have heard it expressed that that's not a welcome place for people. I personally wouldn't, but went around the base of it and stuff. Spent a lot of time in Yango National Park, but I think that's off limits. That's where Bayami went up, so that's not my story to tell you. Yeah, very, very, very. For a lot.
Beautiful country you were in.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I was actually really fortunate. There's a lot of bush tucker up there. Still trying to find it all out down here, but we'll get there. Julie Dawson.
Did you have any creative outlets while you were there? Like, did you sing? Did you make creative practices around the killing of animals or the consumption of animals?
A little bit, yeah. Like, I guess I bushcrafted, but it was to make tools. But I whittled a lot, yeah. And I'd make fishing rope, fishing lines and things like that. Not so much. It's one thing that I didn't, and I would if I did it again, for sure. I wasn't aware of creative practice back then. I was still coming away from a system that didn't really support me doing that ever through my life. So not so much with the bushcraft stuff, yes, but it was always with intention, like a tool or something.
Do you still have any of the tools that you made while you were there?
No, I don't, but I believe in I wouldn't keep a tool I've got fire sticks at the moment that I've had for a year or two, and that'd be about the longest to hold on to them. Like, they've got to go back to the earth and you make a new one kind of thing. No, I didn't keep anything, I don't think, other than like stuff that I'd already bought No, I don't think so. Good question. Make me want to go find some of the old stuff.
Chelsea had a question over here.
Did you have certain rituals that you did every day?
Not that I was aware of, but at times, yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, yeah, a campfire for me is a huge ritual, and I definitely had one of them every day. The foraging and then having the one meal at the end of the day became a bit of a ritual. Waking up for bird time in the morning, everyone knows, like the bird owl where they're going crazy. Waking up to that was a ritual, but the rituals were kind of like I fell into, like it wasn't really rituals I was actively creating or partaking in. It's like I fell into the flow of the land, and so the bird noises would just wake me up every day, but it was something I enjoyed, so I guess that's ritual. But yeah, the rituals were very organic, so they're not as much something that I've really solidified as ritual, definitely.
They're the things that kept you sane.
Yeah, definitely. Or at least, it gave me context and something to measure life against. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
They kept you sane and they also kept you alive. They were literally the things that
Guess
you
so.
needed to do to survive.
Yeah.
And that's, the foundation of ritual, I would guess, really. Been wonderful questions. Any more?
I just want to say as well, I've sent a notebook around for people to write down their email addresses to sign up to the newsletter. I don't know where it's gone. Who has it? Does anyone else want to put their hand up if they'd like to put their name down for the newsletter if they haven't already?
The newsletter advertises the workshops I run teaching survival-based skills, primitive skills, edible medicinal plants and things like that. How to process ants for delicious consumption.
Have you ever been back?
Some places yes, some places I love to go. Never to Jackie Barker camp, never to the one that I feel funny about. Not yet. But yeah, a lot of the places, definitely. I've taken Kate to some. Yeah, definitely. I like to check on the plants that I've planted or, check on how it's recovered since me being there. Yeah.
I think we may have come to the end of our questions. Wonderful, wonderful questions and wonderful answers. Thank you so much, Leafy, for sharing your extraordinary tales.
Pleasure.
It's a real privilege that we are here at the first gathering of you telling something of this quite extraordinary experience. And I know that over time, you'll learn more about your own experience as you tell it. And that will
definitely
be, a slow unfolding for both yourself and for us, I imagine. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for giving me the forum.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leah.